Tim, you've got a major marketing media company and you're out there on the East Coast. I see you just wearing suits and having expensive lunches and all that sort of thing.
That's in the past.
Today's episode of the Phil Experience is brought to you by Rider Justice. Scott O'Sullivan and his team of motorcycle lawyers are nationwide and have been at this for over 25 years. I know Scott personally, and he's helped me to make sure that my policy and coverages are accurate moving into this riding season. Check them out at riderjustice.com. Here we go. Everybody's on, everybody's recording, everybody's good, and we'll go live with the Backcountry Discovery Routes team. Get a little music in there. Everybody, welcome to Backcountry Discovery Routes team. Yeah, Tim, James, Ron, Ina, Thorn. I've been stoked for this episode, and I really, how long have we been trying to set this up? Probably a couple months. If we could go around the room, go around the virtual room, introduce yourself, and then Ina, if you want to, for context, talk about what the Backcountry Discovery Routes is. Because we got people that watch and listen that, don't ride motorcycles. So I think it's important to start that off. So, Tim, you're on the top of my screen. Actually, no, ladies first. Ina, if you want to go first, introduce yourself, and then we'll loop around.
Yep. Thank you, Phil, for having us. Thank you to your viewers for tuning in. I'm Ina Thorn, and I serve as the Executive Director for the Backcountry Discovery Routes nonprofit organization.
Perfect. All right, Tim. You're up.
Hey, yeah, thanks for having us, Phil. This is a great opportunity, and we always love the chance to get out there and talk about our organization and connect with our audience, our core audience, and also expand to people that may not know what BDR is all about. So we're happy to talk about that today. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Ron, you've got the, I had that microphone. I actually still do. It's sitting over there.
There we go.
The Blue Yeti. I love it. Go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly. Ron West. I currently serve on the board of directors, and it's wonderful to be here and to talk about the BDR.
Perfect. So I know we have folks that don't ride motorcycles. We were talking about this earlier. Just for some context before we dive in, and if you want to kind of give us the once over, you're executive director for the Backcountry Discovery. What is that?
Yeah, so Backcountry Discovery Routes BDR, we're a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and our main mission is to create and preserve routes for adventure motorcycle travel. Our organization's work includes promoting rider education, safety campaigns, driving economic impact into rural communities. We encourage responsible travel in the backcountry. And really, we invest our funds very carefully back into the community, working with land managers and other public benefit organizations, to make sure that we keep these remote roads open for motorcycling for generations to come.
I love it. Great explanation. I've got questions about all those, but that's okay. So fun fact. So if you're not watching, too bad, but for video, I've got like all these notes, right? So the lead up to this is I watched your 10-year anniversary video, and I've watched the NorCal BDR, and I did a bunch of research, and there's so much out there. I mean, we could start and glaze over and like, how many miles is it? This is your 13th route, but I think that's too easy. And then it hit me this morning. So I'm like, the BDR, I think, is different to you, correct me if I'm wrong, than it's different for us.
I mean, absolutely. BDRs for, our deliverable to the communities, these routes, but all the hard work goes behind the scenes. And I feel like sometimes we are, in our offices, we have 2 people in the office, so 3 people in the office, and then we have a board of directors. There's 9 of us, and they spread out all around the country. And sometimes I feel like we're just building foundation one brick at a time. And I'm amazed sometimes how these routes come together, how these filming expeditions come together, and then the final project, and we release the film, and then people watch it in the movie theater. And sometimes I can't believe, like, wow, really, we did this? We made this film, especially the NorCal film, some of this drone footage up in the Sierra Buttes, like, I was there, but sometimes I'm watching like with new eyes, because it's a different experience when you're just plugging in, just paper pushing, talking to sponsors, communicating with each other, daily staff meetings or whatever it is. And then we give birth, to this project, to a route, and then it's out there and people can enjoy it. So, for me, it's just, that's such an amazing feeling, like being in the theater and watching it through the eyes of people, and just see how much inspiration and spark people have in their hearts and in their eyes, and they want to go and do it and trace our route. So that's kind of how I feel about it.
I love that. And you guys are creating, right? You're creating something not only for now, but for later. And before Tim and Ron, I know you would probably want to provide some input on that. I just love the trifecta I have here. I think, Ina, you're executive director, very process driven, I would guess. Before that, operations director. Tim, you've got a major marketing media company and you're out there on the East Coast. I see you just wearing suits and having expensive lunches and all that sort of thing.
That's in the past.
No, not so much.
Not so much. We've got Uncle Ron out here. And I'm just like, dude, guy's a storyteller and you're literally the tour guide out there on the route. So to be able to put all those personalities together to create something awesome, it is amazing. Yeah. And Tim or Ron, if you want to add to what Ina said, I think that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, if I may. So it takes a village, right? So it takes a diverse amount of skill sets to do to produce and deliver what we do, and we are lucky enough to have a team with really diverse backgrounds. But there's probably one common thread that flows through all of these people, is that we've all had some type of experience having great experience in riding adventure bikes somewhere around the world, around the country. And, Ina went from the U.S. down to Ushuaia, right, with her now husband. She had her great experience that probably led up to this. Ron has been riding motorcycles for a real long time and has done plenty of adventures. Myself, the same. But I think we all probably realize how hard it is to create a 1,000-mile experience for the average person to go out and say, I want to create a week-long experience. I want to hit all the great spots and hit all the best roads, but I've got a full-time job and I've got kids and I've got all these other things to do. It takes a lot of time. And I think that's one of the beauties of the BDR, is that we do all that for our community. And in that we open up this opportunity to these people who may not have the time to do it, invest the time to do it. So we give them all the tools and the resources to do it and have these great experiences. And we get to share what we really love, right? So in the end of the day, I think for me, at least, I'll speak for myself, that's one of the beauties, is that we're delivering something that may not be attainable, easily attainable for the average rider.
Ron, you want to add?
I've volunteered for a number of different organizations over the years, and this one's unique. It is really amazing. I think not just the board, but also the individuals that support us. What's really amazing about volunteering, and particularly this organization, is that it's a lot of hours, a lot of hard work, but what I get back out of it just is so much more. When I get, emails or phone calls or texts or social media where people, they say, I rode the route, from all around the world. I rode the route. It changed my life, or I had no idea that this even existed in my own backyard. It really, really just gives me back so much more than I put in. So it's just an amazing organization to be a part of.
I love that. And I don't want to stray too far from where I started. I think, we've often heard Alaska is the last great frontier. But you guys have been able to capture some of that, or a lot of that, in what you do here in, Colorado, for example. We're like, oh, there's nowhere else to go. But I think there's challenges in finding that route, building that route, taking, 2 years to build NorCal, or I was watching some of the Northeast route, and you can go into populated areas with known roads, but still do that exploring and do that sort of frontiersman type, for frontierswoman type stuff, right? And that has to be pretty exciting, right?
Yeah, I think that's part of it, right? So I can speak for the Northeast because I had something to do with the development of that route. And in developing that route, we're trying to we're looking at the Western routes and saying, "Oh God, they've got so much open space. They've got these, great mountain passes and views and vistas, and how do we, what can we offer in the Northeast that will equal that?" And so in the Northeast, it's a little different, right? And to your point, Phil, you're never that far from civilization on the Northeast route. So we had to try to give that feel of being in the middle of nowhere, when in fact you're at all times maybe no more than 10 miles from a general store. So the excitement of build, it was an extra level of I think of challenge. But then when we delivered it, I think the surprise that we were able to do that in the Northeast, and people to Ron's point about people coming and saying, I can't believe I just had the most amazing experience, and it was 2 hours from my apartment in Manhattan. I started it, right? So it's pretty cool.
I will ask the question, and I love to bounce around here all over my notes, but what is the major difference, Ron, East and West Coast? East Coast BDR, West Coast.
Well, it's interesting because the entire time that I've been involved in the BDR, I've been focused on not only the Southern California route, but the Northern California route. So I really haven't ridden much, outside of California. It has literally just consumed all of my time. Being a native Californian, I think I'm third generation Californian, this place is just so amazing. Every time I think about, riding in another state or another BDR, California comes calling. And in this particular case, it took us, 5 years to develop the route. So I'm probably not the best person to ask. I can tell you all about California, but comparing it to other states, Tim, that's probably better you.
I think Ina would be a good person. She's ridden both the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic. So I think she'd be perfect to answer this.
Yeah, I mean, quite different. I mean, look at the terrain. West Coast, we've got mountains, deserts, forests. East Coast, it's mainly forests. We're riding a lot under the canopy of trees. There's some kind of rural pastoral lands. So difference there, right? Let's talk about the views. Wide open spaces, high elevation mountains in the West. Like I said, we're mainly riding under the canopy in the forest. There are some mountains, and they're older mountains that what we have in the West, but they're so much smaller. Like I look at them, that's just a hill. You're calling it a mountain. It's still very beautiful. It does have its own beauty, but it's very, very different. Population density. Western routes are so remote, and just you feel like you're out in the middle of nowhere. You don't see people in Wyoming. Like we would see nobody for a day of riding, where in the East Coast we're much closer to the population centers and country homes. Also like the historical aspect. In the West, we have gold rush, mining history, Western exploration, where in the East, it's, perhaps more kind of Civil War history. So quite different, but they all have their unique characteristics that are just so special about each route.
Yeah. You said something, we're going to go off script for a minute. Not that we have a script, but I want to pose a question to the group, because this is something East and West that I've always thought, I don't say I've always, but I've thought about it. And I'm like, why is that? So we're here in Colorado. I would imagine, Ron, that California is about the same tree line. So you go up, maybe you drive to the top of Mount Evans, or now it's Mount Blue Sky, whatever, usually around 11.5 tree line. Out on the East Coast, you got the Appalachians. The tallest mountain out there, I think, is like 6,000 feet, something. Tree line stops at like 4,000. And I'm like, why is it out there trees stop growing at 4,000 feet, and out here it takes 11,000 feet for the trees to stop growing? Anybody got any ideas? I've always wondered that.
That's a great question. Ron, we call Ron the encyclopedia, so I'm hoping he can come out. I have a thought on it, but go ahead, Ron.
Yeah. I think because out west the mountains are newer, if you will. Actually, California tree line it's a little bit lower than California. I'd say probably closer to about 10 or so. But I think that's it. There's just not the nutrients. It's just all rock, and other than little scrub brushes and stuff, not much can grow at those higher elevations.
On the Northeast BDR, I think the only place you get above the tree line is Mount Washington, up in New Hampshire. That's it.
Crazy winds there, right? at Mount
Oh,
Washington?
crazy. Like I think at one time, I don't think they hold it anymore, but at one point they held the highest wind speed record.
I'm a big fan of Jay Leno, and I remember he did an episode where he drove like a steam powered car up to the
Hmm.
top of Mount Washington, and the winds were howling. And that's, I think, where I originally got that, because he was like, "We're going up past 4,000, past the tree line." I'm like, "Wait a minute."
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
I kind of want to touch on. We will get into NorCal, but something that Ron, you told a story, and it sent me on this first doom scrolling and then Wikipedia path. But in watching the NorCal BDR, you talked about the Donner Party, and you kind of referenced it. And I was like, I think I've heard of them, but let me dig into this. Man, I probably spent 20 minutes reading the entire thing on Wikipedia. I'm sure there's other sources. And of course, we know at the end, they start eating each other, right? And that's the whole thing. That's what the alluring thing, right? But if you look at their actual journey and everything they went through, and the shortcut that became a long cut, and all the things, surviving in these shelters, incredible adversity. And I think I put it in my notes to you guys, but that's just 2 lifetimes ago. Like if you like 2 lifetimes ago, people are dragging wagons over hills and walking and doing all this crazy stuff. And here now we are with all this technology, having these meetings. But what I'm getting at, one of 2 things. First of all, a lot of it happened in Truckee, right? And I have stayed in Truckee to go snowboarding. I had no idea. I wish I would have known, because I would have gone looking around. But so I have a little bit of a frame of reference of like, oh, Truckee. But the second part is, I don't think anybody would care about their story. How many other pioneers do you read about because they had a nice, easy journey, went over the pass and got into California, right? The only reason we know about their story is because it was terrible, terrible. And so to me, and I've had other guests on, and I think this is a common theme, adversity is very important. Adversity is important. And it doesn't matter if you're on a motorcycle, if you're doing what they did. And that's what, the more it sucks, the better the story, right? And I think that the BDR has that. I mean, I've watched your films. There's a lot of adversity, broken bones, broken bikes, rain, your gears leaking. And I just want to kind of go around and from your perspective, because you build these routes and you build routes that create adversity, what are your thoughts on the importance of that?
Well, if I could jump in there, I think that, and one of the beauties of riding adventure bikes or any other activity like that, climbing, I used to climb, is that I think by and large, modern life, modern society is really pretty easy. But I think that there's that part of us, that historical aspect of us that's written into our brains. Our forefathers and mothers, had this adversity. And I think that, think about it, if you're hungry, you go to the grocery store or a restaurant. If you're cold, you turn the thermostat up or down if you're hot. So I think that there's a kind of a yearning in our spirit, to challenge ourselves. And I think that's one of the beauties about the BDR, that, it gives you that opportunity to actually challenge yourself. We have the roadmap, but what you experience along the way really depends upon the weather, your bike, your body, and your cohorts.
So, but Tim, I know you want to jump in, but I have a question related to, obviously you're helping to build these routes and the adversity that goes into them, but in your own personal life, you're from Russia, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And I am not trying to, I have no idea how you grew up or what conditions were, but was there some of that in your life growing up, and did that play a part in kind of what you're doing now? I mean, we all are influenced by our childhood and all the things, but I've never really talked to somebody that's from Russia, so I don't know what that's like.
Yeah, I think I did. I mean, I had a pretty happy, normal childhood, but I did leave Russia to come to the United States when I was 16 years old. So my mom just said, we have an opportunity for you to go there. So pack your bags and go, and you figure it out. And it was really hard. I mean, the first 5 years of my life here, I cried almost every day. I wanted to go back. Eventually, something in me said, yes, you have a much better future here. So you better figure out how to make it work. So, just that tenacity and kind of the spirit, the go-getter spirit, I think comes from that at the very early age. I was on my own and trying to carve my own path. And to what Ron said, even with my kids now, their lives are so easy, and they don't have that opportunity to develop, the strength of character and to gain that confidence that they can do anything. So I on purpose try to put them through hardships. Like, my husband and I, we would take them on 12-mile hikes in the mountains, in the Cascades, and they cry and they beg for candy and they want to quit. But, we keep on going, and then we make it to the top. Of the views are so amazing that they understand that, I would not see this beauty if I didn't have to persevere and struggle and get uncomfortable. We take them on backpacking trips and they have to carry a really heavy backpack, everything they need for 3 days in the backcountry. And so that's just, lets them understand what they're capable of and kind of gives them confidence to pursue their dreams. And I did want to follow up. Eli Woody, who is one of our 5-star photographers, once said, "Without adversity, there's no adventure." Right, and even like the ADV in both of those words, they share that root, ADV, adversity, adventure, and so adversity is just part of an experience of adventure and part of the BDR. And I always kind of thought that BDRs for me were sort of a hero's journey, where you're preparing for this big adventure. You're gonna have to face challenges. You persevere through these challenges, and then you come out triumphant. Or maybe you end up in the hospital. Hopefully not.
Yeah.
But it also like helps you develop that empathy, because you see what people are going through, what you're going through, but you're working as a team. I feel like that's why we're so tight at the BDR with our board. Some of us travel together on these expeditions, and we see each other at our worst and at our best. But it makes us, we're like a family now, and it also helps kind of develop self-awareness, empower you to go beyond what you think you can do. And so all these things, that's why BDRs are so incredible. And that's why people come back and they say, I had an adventure of a lifetime. I get emails from guys who are 70 years, 80 years old. He said, me and my buddies, we went and did the Mid-Atlantic and we had an adventure of a lifetime. Thank you so much for giving us this opportunity. I mean, that's people who live their whole life, and this is one of the highlights of their life. So that's just inspirational. But adversity is a big part of that experience.
Huge. And Tim, I know I'm not going to tell your story about adversity, but man, you were wearing the non-waterproof Revit gear.
I don't know if that's adversity. I think that's stupidity is what it is. So yeah. But to Ina's point, and our organization and how tight we are, and hopefully that doesn't come off as cliquey when we're in public, but we truly are like a family. And look at it like corporate team building to the maximum, right? Mm-hmm. We go out and we do these, and it's not just going out and riding the BDR. We're trying to capture the experience on film to share with the audience. So there's a lot that goes into this, and it's not we're just out there, oh, let's just go have a good time. We do, because we obviously enjoy riding, we enjoy each other, but it's a lot of work, and we do. There's highs and lows when we're developing this, and everyone goes through it, and we learn to recognize that in each other, and to work as a team to get through the process and the route. I think the appeal to our community is challenge, is the challenge. They all love riding. That's the baseline. We like riding motorcycles. There's no doubt about that. But it's a level up from that when you go out and do a BDR. And adventure is different to everyone, right? Mm-hmm. Adventure might be just I'm leaving my family for a week and I'm going to be out on my own and I've got to learn how to feed myself because but. Or it's like, we're going to go out and we're going to hit this BDR and we're going to do it. We're just going to camp the entire time. We're going to do every expert section. And that's a whole different level of adventure. So, and the nice part is that you can level it up or level it down, the experience to meet what your idea of adventure is and what you're willing to, bite off, in that challenge. So.
Absolutely. I'm going to ask what you guys call upon. And what I mean by this is we're talking about adversity. So Joe Rogan has this thing he says quite a bit, and he got it from somebody else, but it's like the worst thing you've ever been through is the worst thing you've ever been through. So, if the only thing that's ever happened to you in your life is you got a flat tire, then that's your frame of reference, right? Like, oh, got a flat tire. So, I was out riding out and it was cold and it was raining. Same situation. Just I wasn't on the BDR, but I think back to like, say, my time in the military. I'm like, I've been here before. I've been here before. As a matter of fact, it happened this week. My girlfriend, Mary, she got sick and we had to go to the ER. And of course, we're there all night long. So I'm in like this horrible wooden chair, can't sleep. And I'm like, dude, I've been here before. Like, it's okay. I've been here before. I've been tired. I've been like, it's okay. So I call upon some of those experiences. So when you're out there and it's freezing cold, or you don't want to go, or you're tired, what do you guys call upon sometimes to kind of frame that up? Because it's one thing to say, oh, just be tough and suck it up. Nah, it still sucks, right? It still sucks. And you probably want to quit sometimes. I know I do. So what do you call upon personally to kind of help get you through those things? Ooh, deep question.
That one, you went way deep.
Well, I know what I do. And when I was in high school, I had the opportunity to climb Mount Rainier. And just before we started, I got some kind of stomach flu. I don't know. I was throwing up. I could not keep food down. And I remember sitting in camp before we did the summit climb, thinking, okay, I can either just sit in this tent and not make it to the summit, or I can persevere and make it to the summit. And I realized, you know what? In either instance, in 24, 48 hours, it's going to be over. So I went ahead and persevered. I went ahead and went to the top because I thought, at the end of that, either way, it's going to be over. I'd rather try and fail than not try. And I made it. And so I think that's kind of what I kind of call on, is that no matter how tough it feels, it's going to be over. There's going to be an end. There's going to be sunshine at the end of the clouds.
Good one. What do you got, Tim?
Oof, I'm gonna pass to Ina, so when I can keep thinking.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I've been through some hard stuff. I saw my mom die in my eyes, in front of me, and nothing will probably top that. I just always remember it's your attitude. Like you can be in one situation and look at it like, yes, it's the best, it's the worst thing that's happening to me. I'm so tired. I've been riding for 13 hours and I'm sweaty, I'm hungry, I just want to get off this bike, but we still have 20 more miles to go off road. Or I can look at it like, I'm tired, but I have a smile on my face. This is an adventure of a lifetime. I'm so privileged to be on this ride, and we have a film to make, and I'm just gonna be in a good mood. And it's your attitude to anything that happens. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's that for me.
Yeah. For me, I'd have to say, so I have kind of this motto that I've adopted in life, and it's a Flemish saying. It's als ik kan, and it's I don't know if you know who Gustav Stickley was, but Gustav Stickley was the father of the arts and crafts movement in this country. So Craftsman bungalow homes and Craftsman furniture and Stickley furniture. And so he was this amazing guy. And that was his saying was for his company, his motto was als ik kan, which loosely means the best that I can be. So I think that through my life, no matter what I've done, I've always tried to be the best that I can be at that. And that's what I strive for, and that doesn't mean being the best or better than anyone. It doesn't, because I don't compare myself to other ones. I'm not the best rider in this group. There are riders that are way better than me that in the BDR, but I try to be the best rider that I can be. I try to be the best marketer that I can be. And I think that's, out there on how, when we're building these films, and these routes, how can I contribute to my best of my ability? Right. So that's kind of what I draw on.
I love that. I think there's a Stoic saying, like, you can't control what happens to you, but you can't control how you react to it, right? And being the best person you can be. And we can get into a little bit of riding. When we talk about the films that you make and being out there, and Tim, you're saying you're not the best rider. So I've got it written down here. I can't reference it. The gentleman he's the actual BMW instructor that came with you on the NorCal route.
Richie Few.
That was a snippet. And he was like, I'm almost at my limit. And I'm like, this dude is almost at his limit. And there's a couple things like Mount Patterson, and then there was the lookout. What was
Sierra Buttes?
Incredible. Like, I'm watching this like, there's no way. So I have a GS Adventure, and I consider myself a pretty good road rider. Like I've done a lot of track days and I did some club racing and all that, but dirt, not so much. And when I watch that and I'm watching you guys do it, and I'm watching an instructor say he's at his limit, I'm just like, these people, number one, are incredible. And number two, the film could have a little bit of the opposite effect of like, that looks super intimidating. Like I was getting like heart murmurs watching you guys go up to that Sierra Butte thing. Like, dude, because if you make one wrong move, it's over.
Yeah.
So what do you guys think about, like, those are obviously the expert sections, right? And what do you think about like creating something that is so epic is the wrong word, but it's like it takes a lot of skill to be able to do that, right? And obviously on a big bike too, on a GS. Was that the intent?
Well, I think with this particular route, the more that we scouted it, we realized that we could do two things. One, we could make the main route easier, which we did. But that also allowed us to really amp up the advanced sections. And so we kind of approached it in two prong. Let's make the main route easy, something that someone with some good solid dirt skills could do on an adventure bike, a large bike, fully loaded. But then really challenge those that really wanted to challenge themselves. And so I think that's the way that we approach it from a scouting standpoint. But yeah, even Sierra Buttes, there's a place where actually Ian and I started hiking up. So the last 3/4 of a mile, you don't have to do that. And I don't recommend doing that unless you're really an advanced expert rider, but you can still park your bike there. And it is challenging just to get there. But and then just walk to the top 3/4 of a mile and you get those same incredible views that everyone else had that may have ridden to the top.
Tim, did you ride to the top?
I did not. I walked to the top myself. And it's about 3/4 of a mile to that top. That last section is pretty gnarly, and I considered it. I was on a 1250, fully loaded 1250 GS, and I think if I was on a smaller bike, I probably wouldn't have hesitated. But that is that is like the next level up. So I have to look at myself and say, okay, I'm pretty sure I could make it, but what are the odds that I'm going to get hurt, or I could possibly hurt someone else by crashing? So you've got to be responsible. And that leads to a whole nother conversation, which we can probably get to at some point. So I made the decision not to do that and climbed up and had a great experience when we got up into that fire tower. But that particular section is probably, from what I saw of it and that those that wrote it talk about it, is probably about as difficult as we should probably ever offer on a BDR. And I think in isolation, the track itself is not all that technical, but I think the exposure, no, it is very technical. Let me rephrase that. The exposure and the peril is where that comes in. If you blow it, a 180 turn that's loose and gravelly, it's not like you're just going to bump into some trees. You're going to plummet a couple thousand feet, Ron?
Yeah.
So those are the things you have to consider.
There are only two expert sections on all of our routes. It's the Sierra Buttes and it's the Lockhart Basin in Utah. And we make it very clear. There's a kind of a plaque on the map next to it, important, do not attempt this unless you are an absolute expert rider and maybe even on a smaller bike. That scene is incredible. And we kind of had to put it in the film. We did think about it, like what would people think, that this is completely unattainable for a regular rider. And it absolutely is. So you really just have to know your limits, which is one of our educational campaigns that we're coming out soon, that came out of this NorCal BDR, because there are some sections that they look fun in the film, but you have to know, like, these are expert, riders that are doing these tracks on big bikes.
And I think a detail that we should probably mention about that 3/4 of a mile section is that we don't have those tracks included in the GPX tracks or on the map, highlighted on the map. We have that section, which leading up to that point is an advanced section in itself, and by no means without challenge. But getting up to that parking area that you can take that little hike, that's where we end that out and back. And so we really wanted to punctuate to our audience that that's how serious we are about that section. You're ride that at your own risk, because it doesn't come without risk.
Yeah, well, you
for
could
sure.
die. So, I mean, you could die a lot of
Mhm.
places.
Yeah.
Simply put, yeah. I mean, you could do that on any part of our routes, right?
Right.
But the chances on this, kind of escalate a little bit.
Hey guys, it's Phil. You can make sure to support this channel by liking, subscribing, and do me a favor and leave a comment below. I'll make sure to respond to it. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Let's get back to the episode. So the challenge was obviously, and I haven't done it, but the Mount Patterson section looked very difficult. Obviously not as difficult or with as much peril. There was a lot of peril, but I did see there were people having to take their bags off, and it was very steep. And the views up top were epic, right? That section you go all the way to the top, correct? In your GPX routes?
Yes.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I it's not quite as technical as Sierra Buttes, and as to Tim's point, you make a wrong turn, you crash. But I think, and even that one, the technicality is just, it's so loose. It's got like a shale up there that just makes it really difficult. And so from that standpoint, but the views are absolutely spectacular. There was, in the original tracks, we had the route coming up the east side of Mount Patterson, and that was scouted last summer. Well, actually, I think it was in July, by Nathan and Chris Fant, who helped tremendously with this route as well. And they went up that side, and I had been up that side before, and that was going to be the expert tracks, but it got so bad. We had record snow last winter. It was completely washed out. And Nathan, who's an expert rider, on a small bike, he said, yeah, Ron, we just cannot include those tracks. So we took those out from where we originally had. So, and I think that's one of the things that, when we do these films, it's important to have a group the size that we have, that we all kind of talk about the route and say, should this be included, not included? How do we rank this? And that's why we don't release the tracks or where we're going until after the film is completed and the route's completed, because we do make changes to them at the last minute.
You guys have been teeing stuff up for me this whole time. So Tim, I want to acknowledge the fact that you said you rode a GS, and Enid talked about smaller bikes. So I think we would be remiss if we didn't address bike capability type for BDR. So full disclosure, I've not done any of the BDRs. I'm sure I've ridden some of it around Colorado, but I've not done it. And I have a GS Adventure. And before I really started digging into what this was, I'm like, oh my God, if I do this, I better upgrade my skid plate. I better get some cylinder head covers. Is it too big? I don't know. And then watching the film, I'm like, man, you guys are wailing on these things, absolutely sending it on big bikes. You can send it on smaller bikes. But I've had a few interviews with Lucas from Climb. He's like, the migration is the smaller bikes now, or the progression is you get a big GS and you go down to a smaller bike. So for everybody that might be watching or listening that has never done one of these, and is wondering, do I have the right motorcycle? And I'm not an expert rider. What are your thoughts on the actual type of motorcycle that an average person, because that's what you're making these routes for, I assume, should and could take on your BDRs?
Wow. That is a really loaded question. So, and I'll answer it a similar way that we answer the question of why don't we rate our routes like ski resorts?
You're
Black
ahead of me on
Diamond,
that
Double
one.
Black Diamond. Yeah.
Yep.
There's just so many variables, right? So, and with bike size, it comes skill level and what you're used to. What kind of tires are you running on the bike? What kind of physical shape are you in? How much experience do you have? So it's really hard to say. There is no magic bullet. I will say that naturally a smaller bike is going to be a little less challenging on the routes and taxing on you physically. Me personally, I've only ever really ridden a 1250 or an 800, 850, 800 on our routes. That's and for me that's worked. For me, the 850 is a little bit easier, for silly reasons. Like it's got a 21-inch front wheel and it's a little bit lighter and it just acts like a dirt bike a little bit more. But that said, the 1250, the big, boxer, It's a fabulous bike. It's so well balanced and fortunately easier to pick up, um, because it's got those big jugs, so it doesn't go all the way
Mm.
to its side. So yeah, I think that's a really personal question. But our routes, when we develop our routes, the criteria is to develop a route that is the main route. Now, this is not experts. The main route is obtainable, or for an average rider on a fully loaded, full size adventure bike. I think that's what we try to look at. So, but I'm sure my colleagues can add a lot more color to that.
Well, I was just going to jump in. One is, you have to remember that, you can't develop a 900 or 1,000 mile route without there being some challenges. If you take a look at the Forest Service, where the majority of the West Coast routes, go through, their budgets are absolutely devastated fighting fires. So that's where all the money goes. So they just simply don't have the funds to maintain roads. And even this particular route, even though we tried really hard to make the main route as easy as possible, there's a couple sections that in the last 2 years, because of I mentioned earlier, the record rain and snowfall, just got rutted. And so I think that riders have to, keep that in mind. The majority of the routes pretty darn easy, but they're just going to be challenges. And as far as the big bike versus small bike, I'm a small bike guy. I'm an old guy too, so it's easier for me. But I think the other thing is that, let's say if I was going to go ride Idaho, I don't think I'd want a trailer bike. I'd jump on my 1200 GS and I'd ride up there and have a great time. So I think the other thing too is that, if you're riding a larger bike, you need to make sure you have a solid crew with you, because you're going to need some help at some point along the way, picking that bike up. So at the end of the day, it's a personal choice. And I think you also have to analyze your skill level. Am I going to be able to manage this larger bike, with camping gear? Or a lot of our routes, you don't have to carry camping gear. You can hotel it the whole way, so that can lighten the load. But I think at the end of the day, it's really just a personal choice, making sure that you have the skills to manage the bike that you choose to take on a BDR.
I think you had something.
Yeah, I would add that maybe ride a small section of a BDR and see how you feel on that bike. And that's really it. If you're feeling good and, falls, they're just a part of a BDR riding experience, and that's okay. But just making sure that you have good protection for your bike, really good protection for yourself, that you've taken an off-road class, that you've practiced riding on a number of overnight BDR type expeditions for a few times before you tackle a BDR, and then you decide I'm not feeling comfortable on that bike, or I can totally do it on this bike. So it is really personal preference. And like Ron said, 1 month this route or this section of a route can be totally passable and easy, no problems. And then rain passes or storms or something, and it's completely rutted and it's impassable. So that's why, to Tim's point, we don't rate the routes, because they change from time to time. And we do appreciate when the community emails us a section of a route is completely rutted and impassable. We will do a workaround. We'll check it and do a work around that area and offer an easier alternate for people until maybe that section of the road was fixed, or we do a permanent workaround. We did have a few instances where the road was so rutted that it was completely impassable, and so we changed the route. And our routes they're kind of alive in the sense that we work on improving them every time we get reports from riders, or we decide that there's a better way to go and more scenic. And we have 2 people on staff that are specifically working on routes and making sure they're up to date, that the tracks match the maps. And then we offer those resources, up-to-date resources to people.
You said something that I think all of you have echoed, and it's very much prevalent in your films, and it makes for a good storytelling. And you talked about falling, and you talked about these routes, and they're difficult, and every film is like a ton of falls, and people are laughing, thumbs up, and all this stuff. Or I fall in the sand, or I fall here or there. I'm going to set up this question with a quick story. So in another lifetime, I was a paratrooper, and you go to this school called Airborne School, and you learn how to jump out of airplanes. But the first 2 weeks of that school is learning how to fall, learning how to hit the ground, so you don't break a leg, break a hip, all the things, and then you jump out of planes. My point is, and I asked this question on my notes, and I was like, I'm totally serious asking this, but there's a lot of falling on the BDR, and it's like, is there a way, or is there a preferred way to make sure that you don't snap limbs because especially if you got a big bike and I'm on an expert section, I might fall 10, 15, 20 times throughout the whole thing. So what are your guys' thoughts on that, and staying safe and knowing your limits and actually falling over on a motorcycle?
I if I can just take that. So on the bigger bikes, the consequences of having that bike fall on you are obviously a lot greater, right? So for me, I don't care what happens to the bike. If the bike's going down, you have to really just lose that and say, okay, I've invested in this bike. It's a beautiful motorcycle. It's nice and shiny. But when you go and you ride a BDR, you have to know that your own personal safety is more important than scratching the bike. So I will be the first one to chuck it and make sure that I'm getting away from the motorcycle when it's going down. Because, for instance, getting your leg caught under a metal pannier, it'll snap your leg in a heartbeat. Having that on a GS, having that cylinder land on your ankle will break your ankle. I've done that. So it's getting away from the motorcycle, from at least is what I try to do. If you're asking about the act of falling, but sometimes you're just not prepared. In the last 2 projects, I got speared by a branch that was sticking out. We preach ride right, and I try to stick to that all the time. But the problem when you ride really right and you come around a corner, if there's something sticking out of the woods, it's going to surprise you. And 2 projects in a row, I got hit right in the chest with a tree that had been trimmed, but not trimmed far enough into the forest, and it just literally threw me off jousted me off my motorcycle. So those you really can't prepare for, or no crashes you really prepare for. But when you have enough time to think, definitely try to get away from the motorcycle, and don't put your hands out. Try to tuck and roll, right? I mean, so that you're not. That's. And then
That's fantastic. Yeah.
Hope for the best.
I think one of the things that I was most excited about the arc of this film, particularly since we had Richie, is there's really kind of a teaching aspect to it. And if you watch the film, Richie going up Mount Patterson, he got cross-rutted and he literally just dropped the bike over, but he was still standing. So I think that's a perfect example of, if there is a high side, you can just literally step off the bike and let it go down. And then the other one was Trevor Morton, the other one, the individual who's helped substantially with the creation of this route, and he just rolled away from the bike. So I think someone that watches this film, there actually is a lot of teaching, and there's 2 prime examples. One, Trevor lost the front end, and he just did a rollout and got completely away from the bike. So I think that's what I'm kind of excited about this particular film, and that wasn't something that we had planned on, but having Richie as instructor, I think really added a lot to this film. And I think if someone watches the film with that in mind, I think they'll learn a few things. There
was one section where somebody went down, and then somebody went up and around, and then they went down in front of that person. It was like 2 people went down within, 10 feet of each other, but everybody just stood up like, oh, I'm fine. You just kind of let the bike go, right?
Can I speak to that for a second? Because I'm going to call Ron out on that one, and he knows where I'm going to go with this. Okay. So Ron, we probably had a pretty tough morning, and we're about to, finish the day. And Ron's like, trust me, the rest of this route, it's going to be fairly doable. Nothing, no concerns, no problems. Then we hit that section, not 15 minutes later, and it did some damage. And it was just a rocky, loose section. Maybe it was a couple 100 yards long, but baby heads just piled on baby heads with no, relentless. So it was a really tough couple 100 yards to do, and it did take a few victims. But it speaks to how fluid these routes really are. And that Ron's, last time he wrote it, it might not have been like that, right? So he didn't know.
It wasn't. It absolutely wasn't.
So you've got to be ready for the unexpected,
Yeah. And let's not underestimate the importance of good protection protective gear. Like I
Yeah.
personally do not ride with in a suit that has less than level 2 protection. You know, that's just very important. And then good boots, you know, off-road boots. I've landed under my mid-size bike many times, and I would have had broken ankles many times, and I have not had one because, you know, I attribute it to just having really tough off-road boots. And then just, you know, physically being in good shape and knowing how to tuck, you know, and how to roll. That, you know, I think that's really important. Is just these routes or days can be taxing, and especially when you're tired, then you stop paying attention, and that's when crashes happen. So really important to just make sure that, you know, you train for those physically as well. Being stretchy helps.
And you said something, and it's in the film. Nothing good on the BDR happens after 5 o'clock. And I was like, I would think, because you're so mentally locked in, and even though you might be physically in shape, mentally you're just like, I've been focusing so hard all day, that, you know, you start to you could make mistakes. You're tired. You're maybe not as laser focused, and that's when, you know, I don't know if anybody does like snow sports, skiing or snowboarding, but that's why you never call last run. Like, this is the last run.
That's right. That is the perfect analogy. That is perfect.
It is.
That is perfect.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we talk about the film, and I think we'd be remiss without. Actually, I have an email out to Sterling. He responded to me, and I'm super stoked. I'm going to go do some filming in Africa in a few weeks, and I wanted to reach out to him because I'm like, he's obviously a master at his craft, and we'd be remiss without acknowledging all the efforts of your filmmakers and photographers and what we see as a final product, right? But I'm interested in sort of the logistics and planning. So, like, when I say I'm going after, I'm going to have a script and a loose thing of every day, but you have all these folks with all these other interests. Like, I have to film, I got a B-roll, I got a drone, I got to get up ahead of you, I got to take pictures. And we kind of see a little bit, a sliver of that, but maybe talk a little bit about the logistics of I believe the monumental lift that actually is to incorporate all that and to get all those shots and to get all that filming, right? I'm assuming you don't ride up. Okay, guys, ride back. Okay, do it one more time, ride up, ride back, or maybe you do. I mean, what's involved in all that?
We used to do that, but then we learned along the way. You know, now once the route has been developed, then Sterling goes and pre-rides it, and he makes waypoints. And then basically with the character crew, once we're all filming together, then we leapfrog from one waypoint to the other, and then the film crew is situated somewhere in between those 2 points. You know, they ride ahead of us, like we give them 4 minutes. They ride ahead, set their filming spot, and then we ride through and we meet with them at the next waypoint. Then they come back, meet with us. We give them 3 minutes. They leave back. So that's kind of the behind the scenes of, you know, how that happens. But, you know, Sterling does do a lot of B-roll on his pre-scouting expedition.
No, he does that so he can really focus on the riding part when we're all there, right? So that's where that pre-ride comes in handy. He gets those, you know, scenic shots or points of interest, or, you know, anything that gives a little bit more color to the film. And then they're laser focused, and it's a team. It's Sterling and it's Michael Walecki, who's second camera and assistant director. It's Eli Woody, who is our photographer, who's just you know, we call him the ninja because you never know where he's going to be. You just don't know. And then we get these photos and we're like, I never even saw you there. And of course, Cam Sale, who's our drone operator, who's super talented. And a lot of times that footage is what sometimes gets the most reaction from the audience, right? Because it gives you that 30,000 foot view of what we're actually riding, and the beauty of it all.
And here's another tip for you that we've learned is while you're riding, we also use GoPros to record our impressions of the ride, because the film crew, you know, they're mainly doing static shots of us coming through. And then the commentary comes from us either, you know, while we're resting at a rest stop, you know, we pull out a camera. Okay, tell me how that section was. So you get kind of these fresh impressions of what you went through, or while you're riding, you're also recording what you're seeing, what you're feeling, how the terrain is feeling. And then, that helps you build that story, in a more rich way.
Yeah, I see the GoPros, and the part of me is watching the film like, man, that's so much stuff to collect every day, sift through for
Mhm.
so many seconds
Yeah.
of somebody talking. So a monumental effort. The end result is absolutely incredible. I want to kind of pivot to Uncle Ron a little bit, only because you said you're Uncle Ron. So I'll give you another quick story. I like to set things up. I was out on a hike a few weeks ago, and you kind of climb the trail, little switchbacks, and there's a big sign, and it's got, this is what this was in the 1800s or whatever it was. So Mary walks past, and I'm like, hold on, I got to read this. So I want to see what this was and what this used to be and all the things. And the reason I say that is I'm very interested in the history of the place that I'm in. And Ron, I saw, in the film, you're like the tour guide, and John Wayne shot this, or no, it was Clint Eastwood shot this film here, and this, the Donner Party was here. And I think that's an incredibly important part of the BDRs, and I think that's incorporated into your route is like a little bit of history and a little bit of this is what this is and was, and this is where you're standing. This is what happened 100 years ago, right? And you're obviously very invested in telling that story when you're on the route.
I was really fortunate, growing up. We didn't have a lot of money, and so it seemed like every other weekend, my parents, we'd load up the sedan and we'd go out in the mountains, the deserts, and my dad was a school teacher, so history has always been kind of important to me. And for me, I want to know the history of where we're going through. So for me, the motorcycle is really just a vehicle to go to these incredible places to see unbelievable scenery. And it's just a passion that I've always had. The natural wonders of this state is just astounding.
Yeah, I love the history part of it. When you talked about the East Coast, I'm sure, Tim, you've been to some Civil War battlefields, and I think that'd be, I don't know, but if you incorporated some of that, or maybe you thought about it, but there's just so many cool places to go. Like, I never felt really small until I went to like Gettysburg, right? And you're like, there's this many thousand guys stood here and this many thousand over there, and then there's the hilltop where Chamberlain famously fixed bayonets and did his charge on the hill, in the movie, and I'm just like, I'm standing where this guy did this. This is absolutely incredible.
It is, and we baked into the Mid-Atlantic. Kevin Woody was the main developer on, and he's kind of a history buff as well. And he built a few of those sites into the Mid-Atlantic BDR. And one is Antietam, which is where a battle happened that I think it was the largest single day loss of life in any military battle that the U.S. has ever been in, which is amazing. And when we filmed that route, just by chance, when we rolled up to Antietam, it was this foggy kind of overcast day, and like you didn't really have great vision. And it was some kind of anniversary of Antietam, and they were doing reenactments. So it was so perfect. And we interviewed some of the actors and got some really great footage, but just, it was so moody because of the weather. But yeah, so in the Mid-Atlantic, we definitely tried to put in some of those spots. In the Northeast as well, there's a couple of historic sites as well. So yeah, I think, and there are our audience, or our community. I mean, a lot of them are history buffs, and that they really want to do it. And you kind of have to go out of your way to get to Antietam. And so we did a go around to avoid this whole section where it goes out to that section of the route. So if you didn't want to do that, and I will tell you that I think most people go to Antietam because they want to see that site.
Fantastic. And I'm trying to jump to, you're talking about going out of your way and going different routes. And I'm trying to make sure that we hit all these highlights, because there's one very important part of the BDR that when I read about it, I was like, this is fantastic. And this might be an executive director question, I'm not sure, but you did a study in 2017, and I didn't want to troubleshoot the data, but I just thought it was fascinating. I'm like, okay, so the BDR has generated over $17 million for these very rural communities. You're going through this town that has 20 people, but every day in the summer, there's people on motorcycles coming through and spending money. And I thought that was incredibly fantastic. And also, I believe on your mission, not your mission statement, one of your values, I don't know how much that's increased since 2017, but it seems like a very valuable tenet to have, very valuable tool in your toolbox. Like, hey, we are bringing money to these communities that otherwise wouldn't see folks. And if you want to talk a little bit about how you've impacted that, I think that's super fantastic.
Yeah, and we that part of the mission was not in the original mission of the organization. We just kind of realized that as the routes were being created, that we're supporting these local businesses along the routes. So the study you referenced, that was our first study. At that time, we had, I believe, 7 routes, and the number of economic impact along those routes was $17 million. So we had a second study done in 2022, and we released the results in 2023. That study was done by the University of Wyoming's Center for Business and Economic Analysis. And what that study found is that the economic impact along the BDR routes, along the 13 BDR routes in existence, was over $60 million. So that's just in 1 year. BDR riders that ride the routes, 13 routes, they spend over $60 million. And then 9.6 million was spent to buy motorcycles specifically to ride the BDRs, 9.6 million. So that just underscores the substantial positive influence that BDR riders have on the communities that we pass through. And especially nowadays, a lot of the states are looking for opportunities to attract more outdoor recreation opportunities to help diversify their economies. And so, BDR stands right there with being able to bring a lot of new tourism dollars into these local communities. So, not only are we the advocates of highway vehicle motorcycling, we're also the catalyst for the economic growth in these rural communities. So it's pretty amazing, and we all as the riders should feel proud about it.
There's another aspect to that too, and we've created kind of a symbiotic relationship between these communities, because now they realize that we do bring economic benefit, and they're actually helping us to keep these routes open. Because if there's something that happens that maybe a government agency or someone else says, hey, you want to close down this road, this trail, the local communities are stepping up and saying, hey, wait a second, we're relying on dollars from BDR riders, so we need places for food and fuel and lodging, and they need our economic dollars. So it really has been a relationship that has worked really well.
We could go on, and I don't want to hold you. I do have a few more things that we can kind of round out the discussion with. And I'll start by telling my own experience. Once again, in 2016, I moved out to Colorado, and I had a Ducati 1098S, sexy red sport bike. I rode it 0 times and promptly sold it and bought a KLR 650. And so where I'm going with this is, out here you see nothing but bikes like that, right? And I remember it was all sport bikes. I did a little bit of touring bikes, but now it seems like adventure bikes are just everywhere, the it thing, right? And so how does BDR, I'm sure you guys are capitalizing on the explosion of popularity of getting out there on these trails and having a bike that, it's almost like having a 4Runner or an SUV. I like to have something that 90% on the road, but if I want to go off road, I can, right? And so a lot of these folks that have these bikes are like, they're kind of intrigued. So how do you see that in the future of our industry tying in with what you're doing and, hopefully growing together?
I think that, honestly, I think that we, and this is not us being, kind of egotistical about it. I think that we have played a pretty big hand in helping to move this adventure motorcycling phenomenon forward, right? I mean, the bikes were out there, they existed, and there's people that started it. I mean, you think back to 2002, 3, when Charlie Borman and Ewan McGregor were going around the world, long way round, long way down. And there's many other people that have been doing it that were less famous, right? So we didn't invent it. But the bikes were there. And I think we saw the need to deliver opportunities to these people who are looking, instead of just buying these bikes and heading off to Starbucks, right? They want real places to go, real adventures, and I think that the industry, I think we've helped grow the industry to a certain degree, right? And we can't take all the credit, but I think that it's been a major factor in it, because we know from the economic impact study that we did, we didn't just study the money that we were pouring into those communities, we looked at the buying behaviors of our riders.
The future is bright for adventure motorcycling. I mean, we see more and more people joining the sport. On our deck, on the routes development side, I think we have somewhere about 20 routes between the main routes and the BDRX routes, which are shorter loops, which are more accessible for people. So over 20 routes currently on the deck to be developed and produced, in the next decade. So this concept, it's kind of limitless. Once we've tapped into everything that's available in the US, we can go to Canada, we can go to Mexico. We've got people calling us from Colombia wanting to do this rides. And, some organizations, some of these people, they can even wait for us to to involve the BDR. They're just doing it on their own. And in fact, there's some copycats and the term BDR just became such a generic term now, right? It's just basically means, I'm going to go ride a BDR. Sometimes they just mean, just some off-road route, that they found. So I feel like, more people want to ride these bikes. So they want to explore, not just go in the street or go on a track, but they want to expand, their knowledge of the world. They want to see more of the United States and what's in their backyard. And so it's just such a genius concept, that has really no limits. As long as we're able to produce these routes and provide them for free to the community, it'll just keep going.
And that's a good tee up for, I guess, the last question is, where does it go? So I watched, the anniversary, Oregon was sort of the genesis, right? I was like, we should do Washington. And then that became the Washington BDR. And then all the things started to happen. Like you got a website, and then you got, Butler Maps got involved, and all the things like that was the actual, like, this is what's taking place. And now you're talking about, we're going to Europe, we're going to South America. It's probably become more than you ever thought it would. So we talked about the industry and including that, but when we talk about just the BDR and the business plan itself, because I know you have meetings and strategy sessions and all that, where are we seeing you in, not just this year, but in 3 years, 5 years, pie in the sky, all the things that you want to do with this program?
I feel like part of the success of our organization has been the consistency and staying to our core original mission of creating routes and giving them away for free to the community. Now, we've had many people come in and say, you should do this, or you should market to the 4x4 community because you'll get more financial benefit. But, we've never deviated from this core mission. And that's really what kept us focused on what we're doing and being so successful. So, 5-year plan is, we have a number of routes in development. Last year with the development of the NorCal BDR, we finished the West Coast, so you can ride from Mexico to Canada on the BDRs. Now, the next year is going to be the release of the Southeast route, which will connect the Gulf to the Canadian border. So that'll be a good accomplishment. And then we're really focusing on the middle of the country. We have developing routes in Michigan, Montana, Ohio, a lot of smaller BDRXs in exciting parts of the country that, where maybe the state doesn't lend itself to a full BDR, but we're finding these pockets and creating routes there for people to do. So that's really, international expansion, that's not really part of the agenda just yet. But we just want to find all the best roads, connect the routes, and give them to the community.
You're talking about the center of their country. Who has ever ridden a motorcycle across Kansas? Like, the most terrible. And I was on 70 though. If you could pull up a BDR in Kansas, man, you guys are awesome. Yeah.
There's the challenge. All right.
Yeah, there it is. So I'll leave the floor to, you kind of outlined your future plans. Leave the floor to Ron or Tim if you want to kind of follow up with that, or what you want to leave folks with. Obviously the NorCal movie is awesome. Everything I've seen, I would encourage folks to watch the 10-year. I don't want to get that lost in the YouTube ether, but the 10-year anniversary, 10 years, 10 routes, very informative. Like if I were going to go ride the BDR, I would say, go watch the NorCal movie, watch that 10-year movie, because you have a more of appreciation of what it takes to build this. And then you kind of got that perspective. So, Tim and Ron, if you have anything you want to add, it'd be much appreciated.
I'm glad you watched that film. And that film, the reason we did that film, Phil, was because that was COVID year. And it was the only time within our 13-year history that we couldn't produce a film. So that's what we did. We went back to the archives and pulled a bunch of footage, interviews, which we all did ourselves in our own locations, right? Because we're all isolated doing that, and created. It was a great time because it was our 10-year anniversary, and that was a really good piece of of film. I thought Sterling did a great job of pulling that all together, and it filled a void that we just didn't have that year, which was delivering a route. Yeah, thanks for watching that, and I think it does tell a good story.
Absolutely. Yeah. All the way from back, like I said, Oregon and Washington. And you kind of, I actually took 4 pages of handwritten notes watching that. And obviously I was preparing for this, but it was a great story and very informative on what you all have been able to achieve over the years. So, Ron, I'll kick it over to you, man, if you want to add anything.
If I can just put one more, I want to mention one more thing before I sign off, is that I think we would be remiss if we didn't name the founders of our organization,
Absolutely.
right? Because it's super important that Paul Gillian, Tom Myers, and Bryce Stevens, and Sterling Norton to a certain degree, because he was our first filmmaker. It was their concept and their passion, and without what they did back in 2008 and 9 and kind of built the foundation for what we have today, it wouldn't be here. So I just want to make sure that the people know that, and that these people, and they're still involved in this organization to today, right? They still have that fire in the belly about BDR.
Didn't they win? Who was it that won, I think, for the Washington route? They won a prestigious award in like $200 or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. But, speaking about the inception of the organization, the original idea was inspired, as we told in the film, by the Oregon OHVA organization. But they couldn't sustain it for many years. It eventually, they started charging for maps. So all the signs that they put on the route got taken off. So the idea was there and we were inspired by it, but really what it took to get from 2010 to where we are now and how much we've grown, it's the people who were at the core of the organization. Paul, Bryce, Tom, Sterling, these were visionaries, but they were also doers, who were able to execute on this long-term vision, and get us to where we're now. And they were also selfless individuals, because they could have made it into a business and, make money, but it was a decision they made that this is going to be for the community and by the community, and not for profit. And so, and the team is just so important for, where we were and where we're going. Knowledgeable routing, mapping enthusiasts, creative marketing people, savvy businessmen and women. It really we would not be here if it wasn't for, the people who were at the helm of the organization and continue to be to this day.
Well, I think to that point, our corporate sponsors, they pretty much, underwrite the cost of the film, but, really our day-to-day operations, the BDRs, is really run, well, not run, but funded by individual sponsors, individual writers that write our routes and appreciate what we're doing and therefore support us. So, I just want to just shout out and just say a big thanks to everyone that supports the BDR. We couldn't do the fun things that we do without them. And they're really the unsung heroes in the creation of this organization. So I just wanted to say shout out of thanks to each and every one of the supporters. And go to our website, ridebdr.com, and get more information about supporting
and support
the BDR.
us. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. We are 90% we're supported by individual donations from riders who ride the routes, and they're so inspired and they feel like we've given something to them that they want to give back. So, sponsors are really important, and we're, so happy to have the support of over 50 adventure brands that support BDR. But it's really the individual community riders who ride the routes and want to give back. And if, the symbiotic relationship continues, then, we can go forever.
Yeah.
Last thing I'll leave you with is the fact that all of you would sit back here and, not take any personal credit, but acknowledge everybody that came before you and everybody that's involved speaks volumes about your organization, because as all of you know, and I know that wouldn't happen with everybody. Some folks would stand up on a pedestal and be like, yeah, look at me. So it speaks a lot about your organization, speaks a lot about your culture, and that you're doing this for the community, by the community, and everybody else involved. So I hope you guys had a good time today. Thank you so much, Ina, Ron, Tim, for being on the show. Can't wait to publish this. We'll sign off. Thanks everybody for watching and listening. Backcountry Discovery Routes team. I'm going to do a little outro.